Yo, what's up? Welcome back, everybody, to our little tournament podcast. Second episode right here. We've got 7 games played in the tourney so far. And as you can see, the guest this time around, I didn't get a captain of a team this time, but during the scheduling for the last episode, I thought about what would be a good guest for the first one. And obviously, Andy is somebody who's super involved. He's a captain, and he'd been doing well. And what I said is, I always want to get people after their wins, after their victories, so they're a bit easier to talk to, a bit happier to talk themselves as well. And obviously, for this one, well, I wasn't quite able to get somebody coming off a victory. Team Obi, of course, losing their last match here, but the rationale is pretty simple. I wanted to get a player from every team at some point, and I couldn't even be sure that Obi's team was going to be in this tournament for much longer, if they even were going to get any more wins. So I figured, well, before it's too late, let's get some of them on. It's all right. It's all right. It's all right, Rep. So yeah, tell us real quick how you doing, how you feeling about the tourney, and is Team Obi gonna get another victory here eventually?
Yeah, we're doing good. I think overall we're doing fine. It's group stage, obviously, and we still have our Reaver series to play. So I think it'll be. What'd you say? You said something like we have at least 5 more games or something like that, right?
Uh,
So can't
yeah,
be out before then, right?
yeah. I like how you're calling it the Reaver series. It's
Oh
technically
yeah, Halu.
Team
I
Halu, but
forgot.
I know the
Well, he
Reavers.
was he drafted, so Reaver was there for the draft. So
Yeah,
I
he's
yeah,
definitely more of the present face here
yeah.
of that group, but that's fine. All right, yeah, your team. I mean, you've got at least 2 more games against Team Riva, and then at least 3 more in the semis if you have to play them.
Right.
That is so. Yeah, at
Yeah.
least 5 more games for your team. So
That's
I'm rooting for you guys to at least get 1 more victory there. If for no other
yeah.
reason than to just prolong the tournament, I'd be in for that. All right. Yeah, but good. And as I said, of course, your team's coming off that most recent loss. That's, of course, the
Yeah.
series against Anti. And they are a strong team, of course. They've also been
Mhm.
playing Anti and Cheeze in a lot of their games, so pretty strong lineup so far. They won the series against you guys 3-1. And if you remember, I asked Anti in the last podcast whether or not he thought uh, he had a clear edge over your team. And he was actually very timid, I guess. He wasn't
Yeah.
ready to proclaim his team favorites. Now we've seen a little bit more. At least Team Halo has played 3 games total now.
Mhm.
So what is your general idea of the 3 teams' power levels? Is Team Anti just the favorites? Are you gonna rematch them soon here, or
Yeah.
what's your take on
Yeah.
this?
Well, I think so. It's okay. It's still hard to decide how good Team Halu Reaver are because they've now played 2 games, right? Or three.
They
They've
played
played
three,
three
yeah,
now, I guess.
yeah.
3 games. So you're getting more of an idea. But like the last game, for instance, it was really hard to make any kind of assessment. Someone dies to one warrior early in the game. It's like who knows how good they're actually playing. So it's hard to make an assessment on their team, I think. On but overall, I guess I think they're figuring out the draft strategy still because they're a little bit behind Obi and Anti on that. I think. Um,
I would
but
agree.
then yeah, but then the against Anti's team, I think I think it's still safe to say that we're pretty evenly matched teams overall, and it really depends on the lineup. So, like players being there when they're scheduled and stuff like that, or having to sub in other players for the game, it messes things up a little bit. But I will say that I think of all the things to surprise me maybe is that Kismic has really like Team Anti looks so much stronger with Kismic playing well that it's actually kind of insane. Like they're a strong team in general, and I think that whether he plays or not is one thing or another. But the games that he's played, he's seemed to play very well. Like even debatably better than like Cheese or Anti have. So it's, that maybe comes as a surprise and makes their team seem very deep,
Yeah, honestly,
So,
that's exactly it. Their team, I mean, he went as like the fifth pick or something of that team. He drafted Cheeze, then Hein, then Elk, then Abi, and then Kiss. Yeah, he was the fifth pick of that team. And he's been playing a bunch. I think he's played 3 games. He's got the most games and the most kills in the tourney. As many as you, but he's got 1 less game played, so it's a bit more impressive, actually. So no, you're completely right. He was one of the biggest discrepancies there in the draft between which pick he was listed as and which pick he actually ended up being picked as. But he might be
and
a rotation player for them going forward. Yeah.
yeah, and the other thing that I think is impressive is he's been playing with like their third draft Civ almost every game. It was like, he played with Persia in the game against us, and then he also played with Scandi, which was their third pick, I think, in the game against us. So, he's been making good use out of what would have been lower tier Civs. So
That's a good point. I sadly haven't checked that a lot. That is a stat that I should dive into a little bit deeper, maybe once we get a bit bigger sample size. But you're right, Kismic, he got the second pick in their first game, then he got the
yeah,
last pick in the Scandinavia game, and then
yeah,
he got a last pick again with those Persians against you guys.
yeah,
So you're completely accurate there. I hadn't noticed that, but of course, when you're playing with people like Cheese and Anti, maybe they're looking to grab the higher tier civs there for themselves. That makes sense, and I'm not saying that's a bad strategy. But now it looks like that's paying off very, very well for them
yeah,
so far. So yeah, I agree. Their team is looking scary, but also dependent on which types of roster everybody feels. And of course, your team not exactly helped by the circumstances of Archeryver's vacation. So
right.
we'll see how that goes going forward when he actually ends up coming back, or I don't even know that if that plays a role or how many weeks that vacation is. But whatever, yeah, that's your second pick, so
Yeah,
happens.
it's a little tough.
All right then. That's for the general team strength here. Of course, still we're kind of waiting for Team Halu to show a little bit more, also show more of
Yeah,
their players maybe. But
yeah,
yeah, their draft, as you said, their drafts have been very old school, I guess, very typical MPT, and I thought that they might have an advantage getting to watch so many games of you guys and you guys figuring out the meta for them. But it
yeah.
looks like they haven't watched a lot. At least Halu going into that game, not the very last one, but the one against you guys.
hmm
Oh no, sorry, that wasn't against you. Which one am I talking?
Against against Anti,
Yeah,
probably.
that first one against Anti. He
Yeah,
just picked literally the civs that were doing the worst Celts Egypt together. And I'm
yeah,
not saying they have to be bad, but it's definitely not a lesson learned from the previous games of the tourney. So yeah,
right.
they'll also be showing us more going forward, hopefully. Maybe as early as tonight, actually, against you guys. You're playing, if everybody shows up, we're gonna be playing 2 games tonight there between Obi and Halu's team. Any thoughts going into that? Because we've got 2 different line. I'm not sure. Are you actually aware of the lineups playing for both the games?
Yeah, I looked at them. So, we're playing the same lineup both times,
You
right?
guys, yes, exactly. You have the same rotation for both games, and then Halu has some pretty significant changes, I would say.
Yeah, yeah. Because of the first time, I guess he's just playing. So it's Halu, SDN, and Zardoz, and then the second time he's swapping Zardoz for Towel. Is that
Yep,
right?
yep, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Presumably, we don't know
Presumably,
who will end up showing
right.
up, but all right, yeah.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting. So I guess I haven't played either Halu or Zardoz in the tournament yet. I mean, I played both of them many times in normal MPT, so
Yeah.
it's not like I'm unfamiliar with how they typically play. But that should be interesting. I guess I've seen Halu play now twice against Anti's team and Zardoz once, but Zardoz's game was, I mean, maybe you can call it typical Zardoz, but it was like losing workers and spearmen to barbs was just awful to watch. I mean, it just seemed terrible, cursed from the start almost.
Yep, I agree.
And then in the next game, though, we haven't played Towel either, but or I haven't, but he looked really good with Roam. I mean, like there was a moment there where I thought he was gonna solo Cheeze. Now, granted, Cheeze was sending his horse stack out to Inca and stuff like that, but it looked for a second like Tal was actually gonna get the kill on Cheeze in yesterday's game, and that was, I mean, it was a crazy Legion army that he had at home even. So that's pretty impressive room play, I would say.
Yep, I called that out in the cast as well. I think that was the best roam play that I've had in the tourney so far, because they haven't been picked as a high tier Civ, and people also haven't been doing great with them from my memory at least. So I definitely would agree that
Yeah.
that was some of the best that I've seen. So maybe he's actually gonna turn the ship around for Team Halo. They picked up their first victory in his first game, so maybe tonight he can continue that trend. And definitely, yeah, that's gonna be a big difference. If you're completely right, if Zardos and Towel play at the level that they've both shown before, then that's a stark differential there. Anyhow, I don't expect Zardos to just be useless every game. He's back to front page even. He's climbed a lot on MPT.
Yeah. No, I definitely respect Zardos's play. It's just so funny to me that like in the first tournament game he played, like barbarians were just out there pillaging his land and stealing his workers, and it was like he just could not catch a break, it seemed like. So that was pretty tough.
No, yeah. Yeah, don't. What were you gonna elaborate?
No, I was just gonna say the other player though, SDN, I think this is correct. I think I've played against SDN now in tournament games more than anyone else, because Cheeze and I played the SDN Archreaver team twice, I think, in the 2v2 tournament.
Yes.
Not including the group stage, right?
Yes. Oh, you didn't play play them in the group stage, but yeah, in the bracket you faced them twice, yeah.
In the bracket, that's what I mean. So it's like it's kind of funny, but obviously, and I've talked about this a little bit, but the meta, I think, for 2v2 is very different than 3v3, but it is still kind of funny because he's maybe one of the players I am most familiar with his tournament play style. So,
Oh, you're mentioning tournament play style, and that's something I also wanted to briefly discuss, because I think that there's very clear play styles that are suited for these tournament maps, and then there's play styles that just aren't. And if you're an MPT player that relies, like me, on staying at home, and then when you've got a couple of units trying to cheese a kill somewhere, that's not typically what works well on this type of map. You need to get involved early, and then the better you are in terms of properly building up stacks, maximizing efficiency, microing your production properly, and of course just the basic thing of reading the map, but of course it's way simpler in the tournament than it is in regular MPT. That's typically what makes good MPT players for this tournament, I would say. And there's definitely playstyles, especially once you start getting from between ranks 10 and second page, so the latter half of the first page and then the second page players. Those are the types of players that are usually really good at some things, but then also quite deficient in other areas. So I think in that area you get the starkest contrast between players who are whose playstyle just doesn't translate that well into tournament. And one thing that I was wondering, because the two examples I thought of in that regard is Zardos, as you mentioned. We've seen him play that one game. He was kind of a bit scared and didn't really manage to, of course, I mean, circumstances were also not great for him, but didn't really manage to build up properly there. And it just looked, it just looked bad for him there. And then on the other side, you've got players in that same elo range that seem to be having massive impact in the tournament. You could mention Kismic there as an example.
Yep.
Maybe yourself as well, actually. You're as of now, you're pretty much the same elo as Zardos. So I would say it's actually super interesting. And where do you come down on in this discussion on SDN? Because you're saying you are familiar with him, and I have him in my mind. He's more of on the cheesy kill end of the spectrum as well. But somehow he still ends up performing, or at least his team ends up performing in this tournament, and in the previous tournament more so is what I mean. So what do you think about him and how his playstyle works in this?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's known for his horse plays. He likes his two movers and his, horse stacks, his chariot stacks. He played Egypt in the game that we played against him, the first in this tournament, and he got the kill on our Iroquois player. So obviously
True, yeah.
he's still like, but even that kill felt, as you say, maybe a little cheesy because it wasn't like an overwhelming kill,
Oh
and it
no.
was a double team, but it is kind of it's interesting because I think his build orders are so different than everyone else's. I think like I've seen him multiple times in tournaments now go for like a barracks opening, which is just, I mean, if you're not as a non-milsive, if you're not like as Egypt, he'll just like go straight barracks or something like that. And it's just you get there and you see a veteran warrior and you're like, what are you even doing? And then eventually he'll have some sneaky kill, and it's like, well, I guess he still knows how to do it though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think he plays maybe so like I'll say he plays his tournament games, I think, a lot similar to how he plays normal MPT, which I'll say for myself is definitely not true. I do not play tournament MPT even remotely similar to normal MPT. So, which maybe is more obvious in the tournament style, because I actually like can do stuff there sometimes.
Uh-huh.
But um, because like he'll play the same kind of like he'll have usually about one to two warriors in each city. He'll have some amount of sentries, some warrior wall going on, and he'll send out like a unit or two. But most of the higher tier players in this tournament so far have found really good use of sending early warriors to go and pester enemies and things like that. And that is it. It feels like it goes against a lot of his playstyle to do that, and I haven't seen him do much of it like this tournament or the last one really. So
Yeah.
He's a unique player in that way, I guess, but he still finds ways of making it work, I guess. So
Yeah, I mean, that's right. At least he doesn't seem to be getting any worse in the tournament. You're saying he plays
yeah,
pretty similar, but that's also right. That is just what it is. It's not necessarily a good or a bad thing,
yeah,
because you have you have people who are just, I don't know, getting nervous, overthinking stuff or whatever. He seems to be playing like normal. I also wouldn't say he's like an elite player in this tournament, but I mean we've only in this tournament in particular we've only seen him play one game, I guess, maybe two.
yeah. I
What?
think one.
Well,
Right?
yeah, I think it was only one there. Yeah, it was actually. So looking forward to his second and third one tonight.
Yeah,
That hopefully will give us some more stuff to discuss. But all right, that's it for the typical or for the general team assessment. Now let's maybe shift it a little bit on. I'm thinking right now what is the logical next place to go. I'd say maybe let's actually start talking about strategy first before we go into specific CIVs or anything. Because there's one thing I wanted to bring up. And I think it was best illustrated in the game, in your game, in your most recent loss, I believe it was, where you were
hmm
playing, yeah, you were playing Hittites. That's the game, exactly.
yeah,
So in that game, and I mentioned that in the cast as well, that was for me a game where the value of taking GA was perfectly illustrated. You had the enemy team immediately build two or three cities, then immediately send warriors to each other and get GA of each other. Now, admittedly, it didn't work. Cheeze lost his chassis to his Abbey's warrior, and
I
but
didn't know that.
he,
It's
he
funny.
yeah he got it a couple of turns later then. But the point still stands, and I believe that's also the reason as to why you two guys couldn't kill Kismic in that initial push with Archriver, where you
Yeah.
Because he had GA there for a couple of turns, and if you remember, Archiver called that too. He called
Yeah.
that a couple of turns before he saw a low HP Immortals there. So the
Yeah.
thing is, if you guys had just immediately, like not made Archiver especially, he made a pretty decent sized stack. If he had just immediately started out with one or two
Yeah.
Galax, gotten GA off you, and then built up
Yeah.
a proper stack, or I mean, I guess a bigger stack, I think
Yeah.
that could have been a different story there. Or on the other side, if Kismek
Yeah.
hadn't taken that GA, he might have just died there too. Cause so that's what I think. I think proper GA timing is very specific in this one. 2 or 3 turns too early or too late can make a big difference there. And
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any other games where I would say it really decided the outcome. But I
Hmm.
would say it was definitely noticeable in that one. And is that something that you guys have, you yourself, or maybe even in the team, have during the games discussed and given a
Yeah.
lot of thought to?
And in that game in particular, I was trying to get him to hook his iron earlier because Boogie and I had both saved a ton of gold for him to upgrade. And Galax are expensive. So it's like, you only need 6 of them and that'll wipe all your team's gold or whatever. So, and at that point, it was what it really came down to is I was checking F3 and I had like mostly warriors and like 1 3-man or something like that. And I was checking F3 and Abby was still weak to me or something like that. And I was like, if you just upgrade right now, you can probably go kill him like right now, and I forget what it was. He was like making a mine or chopping a forest or something. So he dawdled like 3 or 4 turns to get his upgrade. and Abby, I think by that time upgraded to swords, or just a couple turns after. So we ended up going to Kismic. But it seemed like one of those things that is, if it could have been just a little bit, I don't even know if we needed GA so much as we just needed the better units just a little earlier. So I do. And that game was it had all sorts of maybe strategical flaws. But I will say, even though Celts haven't performed well, it felt really crazy to be able to pick them in the second round. That still felt like maybe the other team messed up a little bit, you know?
Yes, exactly. Because before every game is played, I try to always predict the draft because I gotta
Mhm.
put in the images in my OBS so that I can display the draft on screen then. So I always prepare a draft that I think might happen so that if I get my picks correct, I don't have to change so many things
Right.
during the draft. And I actually didn't expect, I hadn't expected Celts to drop off that far in priority. I expected them to make it through the first round, but then I expected them to be
Yeah.
banned in the second ban rotation.
That's what we were expecting that too. I think we were thinking we were going to end up with, I think the plan was to end up with either Iroquois or Maya and ban the other one or something like that. And it was because we were thinking they were going to ban Celts, but they, I guess their thought process was probably they didn't want it to be one ag versus one ag with us on Celts and them on Inca or something like that.
They did
But
well there. I think they had a really nice draft. I said in the cast too. I didn't really like you guys' draft there. Maybe I'm just a
yeah,
Hittite hater in general, but
yeah,
I don't know. It just sounds like Celt, Sumer, Hittite versus Inca, Maya, Persia. I wouldn't really want to play your side. And you've mentioned the most important thing, of course, is being the number of aggressives. If you have a different number of aggressives on each team, that's pretty much always just dictating who gets the score lead, and
yeah,
and that means it puts the pressure on the enemy to find a kill. But if you just pick more axes than the enemy, that automatically means from turn one everybody knows the other team has to go for a kill at some point, and that is pretty powerful. And that's exactly why I liked their play so much as well, because they figured out they were going to have the score lead, and they
yeah,
needed to do, they had 2 industrial civs as well, so they were not even only having good growth but also great production. And yeah, they all they had to do was just build up normally with their civs, and then they went for that early GA, so it was so hard to kill them. I like that a
yeah,
lot. So yeah, they did a good job leaving the Celts open there and ensuring another axis for themselves. That was pretty smart, I guess.
yeah. I mean, I can't fault them. It worked out, right? They got the win. I think that I don't know if like Abby and Kismic had switched spawn locks, I think we would have been in a lot better place.
Yes,
So
I agree. I agree. You didn't really want to kill Abby in general because he was in the middle as
yeah,
well. You
exactly. That's
don't.
just offering a free kill to the other team pretty much.
Yeah.
Unless we caught a size 1.
No, you don't want to. You don't want to give that over usually, and that sucks a lot, especially when you have a strategy. It wasn't really the case this game, but maybe to a lesser
Yeah.
extent. But when you have a strategy where you have one particular matchup that you want to exploit, like prime example being like Vikings into Maya or Persia into Maya, where you just
Yeah.
know you want to target that guy, and then it ends up being that they're like super difficult to reach, or as you're saying, in the middle of the enemy team. That's that's kind of just a killer for that strat, and I guess yeah,
Yeah.
I understand that would have maybe changed things a lot there for you guys, but who knows? I like the enemy team's draft better, definitely, but I gotta say as well, it really depends who's playing as well, right?
Yeah.
Without even throwing any shade, but if you've got another player in Sumeria, maybe they can actually keep Cheese down way longer, and
Yeah.
then
Well, and it was really interesting, but okay. The whole Cheese killing Samaria is still crazy to
no,
me
he
that
should
that
get that
worked.
kill. He should never get that kill, but he
Now,
also
I mean, like I feel like average rolling, he probably doesn't win. But then let's just say he has slightly better than average rolling. He loses units, and then I probably get a retake there. But it was like somehow he managed to not lose anything but like 2 archers or something.
no.
That was crazy. So, and honestly, I thought that was a strategic blunder by Cheese because his Incans were so much bigger than our Sumerians. It was like, and they had more longevity to them, it felt like. Like, our Sumerians didn't look like they had a lot of late game potential. And the Incans really, I mean, they were big, and they were on 4 cities, maybe 5, before they took that kill. And it looked like they were about to trade away essentially a 4 city nation for a 3 city nation and not have any possibility of like Abby or Kismic retaking that city either. Because they would have been right on top of me pretty much. So that felt like going for that kill in general was not actually a great idea by Cheese, but I mean, it worked and he held somehow also.
It works apparently every time. I agree. Maybe I didn't see it that as much in that game because I thought he just felt comfortable defending that because he had the
Yeah,
forward planned already, so he had a road
yeah,
pretty much going to that city. Maybe he just felt like he had what he needed to defend there. He also maybe knew that you didn't even get GA yet, or maybe he presumed that you had it at that
yeah.
point,
I had GA,
but
yeah.
it had
I'd
taken
had it
quite a
for a
while.
while.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
maybe he just thought he could help, but in general, maybe you're right. Maybe Cheese just gets too horny for these kills
I
every
know.
time. But he's
I
winning
will.
every time. How can you can't
I
really
know.
you can't
Yeah,
really blame him
that's
as
right.
long as it goes well. But fair enough call there. It was definitely close, and you're right that if Boogie sells himself a bit to a bit a higher price there maybe
Yeah,
Cheese doesn't hold on to that city as well. And you're right, of course. If at that point the Abbey was nowhere near to be able to retake that,
yeah. No.
and at that point it would have been horrible, of course. But nah, it's difficult. It definitely it's not a good trade. But you also
Yeah,
gotta maybe factor in that at that point Persia was pretty big and they were gonna kill
yeah.
Arch, so
Probably. Well,
probably
and
yeah.
this is the thing I was gonna say is his team was knocking Kismic. I can understand them saying that it was not a good idea to send your whole stack because then you could die at home, which he literally almost did. I mean, he did not have very much at home when those Gaelics arrived, so that could have been like Cheese's attack was I think a tactical misstep, but Kismic's forward push of his whole stack was a tactical misstep as well. But I think just the fact that Kismic sent his stack out though kind of won the game for them or secured the game. I think they were winning without that. But um you probably remember this because you get to see everything, but like right before Cheeze captured Boogie's city, I think.
You both went over there, right? You and
Yeah,
Arch.
Archreaver was on like a hill, like 3 turns from Cheese, maybe less. It was like he was right there. And that is a guaranteed kill if that stack gets there. There is no way Cheese would hold both. What my like 15 units or whatever, and Archreaver's 12 Galix. Like he only held with like 4 units left, if I remember the save correctly, on like low HP. My hit and Archreaver's 1 unit or whatever. So, like if 12 Galix were there, that would have been it. Cheese definitely dies. And Galix are funny, but they could, if I hit first and he could have probably sent most of that stack back and still gotten to Kismic in time if Kismic sends it like, 2 or 3 turns later. And if he can't get it back in time, he definitely just goes for Abby. And, you know, Abby's a good player, but every now and again, if you just send enough units in enough directions, he'll get flustered and something might open up. And so that, the opportunity for winning the game really closed when Kismic moved his stack forward because Archiever was forced to send his stack back. And then it was pretty much once Arch's stack went back and we couldn't get the kill on Persia, it was over.
Yeah. Yeah, no,
So
I agree, and that's something Kismic also mentioned. So it's interesting that you guys felt the same way. He also thought that it was absolutely necessary for Archiever not
yeah,
to be allowed to just move about wherever he pleased. So I
yeah.
guess, yeah, again, we've said it before. Kismic's been doing well in general, and yeah,
I do
all
think it's
yeah.
funny though. If you're gonna paint a target on your back, you should probably leave some more units at home. you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, that's the thing. He didn't need to bring like the 30 stack of immortals, but
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, that's right. He overdid it a bit, I guess. But fair
Maybe
enough.
just a bit.
No, it's fine though, and I'm excited for potential rematches there as well.
Yeah,
Honestly, yeah, we have barely had bad matches in this tourney so far. So,
yeah.
yeah, looking forward to whatever matchups we get there going forward. In any case, so that's a bit of talk about specific game state situations, specific
hmm
plays. Now, to conclude it, let's talk a bit about civs, as we've said before.
Yeah.
Um, so, of course, just like in the talk with Anti, we don't want to like spoil a team's complete strategy, and you're not the captain, so technically
Yeah.
your opinions aren't reflective of your team's decision making entirely. But still, I don't want to give you have you give me a full rundown of your priorities. But of course,
Yeah.
I've shown you my tier list. I've made this tier list a week ago or something, and that is again for everybody. That is a tier list of this for this tournament. So how I how highly basically I believe these civs should be prioritized or what their roles could be. And as you can see, you guys at home, you can just see it on the screen there. But maybe if you're lazy and you're just listening, I'll give you guys the gist. We've got Celts, Zulu, Incans, and Aztecs as the highest tier must pick or ban civs. The tier below is Maya, Inca, Sumer, and then it starts going down from there with Rome being in a specifically elevated position, and then some civs that are just lower priority overall, and then some other civs that are situationally in a better spot, but also in some situations in a worse spot than their yeah respective other options there. So yeah, that's I've shown you the list as well, and basically the question is just in this list, what are the most egregious outliers in your mind? What do you think is being overrated? What is being underrated? Any picks you would make that you disagree with there?
Um, I think your top like half looks pretty good. I think most people agree that the first round pick bans are pretty much as they should be. Um, and Zulu hasn't even made it past the first ban phase, so yeah, I don't think there's going to be any complaints about that top echelon there. But I think, I don't know, somehow I haven't figured out Japan yet myself, I don't think, but it feels like a better Civ than Egypt to me.
Okay.
Um, and it almost, I feel like Japan feels similar in like, ability to Rome. Because in a weird way, the bonus move on the worker is almost like being industrious. It
Yeah.
actually is. It is just a strictly better version of industrious for roading purposes. It's worse at mining, but it's like only barely worse,
Yep.
Um,
It is
so like
comparable. Yeah.
yeah, and so and that kind of makes Japan kind of cool because they have that flexible, slightly cheaper, still high powered samurai unit, and they effectively have almost three traits. They have the pseudo industrious, which maybe is even debatably better than industrious. Like the only reason it's worse is you don't get your extra shield as early from your mind, but like past that, it's pretty much just a better trait, I think. And then you get its normal two traits on top of it. So it feels like a really it could belong up there with Rome for me. Um, I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting, but you're situationally good bad. It's really hard to imagine Byzantines being any good unless the other team has taken Scandinavia and you are in a great place to just sink every Scandinavian galley with Byzantines. It's like there's like maybe one situation where I could imagine Byzantines being a really effective civilization. And Babylon, I would have said, should have been rated higher than this, except that it's pretty consistent that you can get to the resources you need, especially if you fast tech them. And so the fact that their UU doesn't cost or it doesn't like require a resource, which is usually a benefit in MPT, is not so much useful here. So I agree that pretty it's pretty bad down there. I don't agree that Hittites are on the bottom tier. Um, you may joke about this, but I honestly think that Hittites are better than Egypt.
I've
Um,
heard this a few times now from different players. I listen. I mean, dude, it's all nice and well. But I definitely agree that sometimes expansions can be really nice, and
yeah,
I guess there's that. But you both have industrious, right? So
yeah,
it's literally the same there. Religious, I would say, in this tourney format is I'd say it's oftentimes better than expansionist, but
yeah,
it depends on the game. And then you pretty much the only comparison is the unique units.
yeah.
And I don't know, dude. I definitely don't love Egypt, and they've not been doing great here, and I don't have them rated highly. But the thing
Hmm.
is, both of these units have the deficiency of not being able to cross rough terrain. You
Yeah,
can build up a Doomsday of War chariots easier than one of three mans, I would say, and definitely early on. Um, they are just scarier from my MPT experience, and that's why I called the bottom tier the way I called it. I'm not saying that these
yeah,
civs have to be garbage. I just have never ever seen them used in a tournament game
yeah,
to practical use. I just haven't seen it done. So
yeah.
I'm not saying it can't be done. Maybe for Greece it can't be. I don't know, but
Yeah,
um,
I mean, yeah, except, Reaver could have gotten his kill that he got yesterday playing Greece. So,
but that is not a practical use of that civ, right? I'm
yeah.
just I'm just saying that. Yeah. No.
Um, I think, okay, so here's the thing I think about Hittites. The reason I think that they are better than Egypt, you have to play them maybe a little bit more um, strategic. They're much longer term civ because I think the problem with Egypt is their religious trait is kind of useless, even though it's a good trait for score pumping and whatnot. And like Aztecs can make good use of the religious trait. And you would say, like, what's the difference? Aztecs and Egypt feel really similar. But when I would be making Jaguars, I won't be making temples. But there comes a point when jaguars are no longer useful, and then I stop making them and I make temples and archers and things like that. With Egypt, it's like you feel like you have to always make war chariots in order to use your civ effectively. And so you never feel like there's a great time to put in temples. And even if you live to the end, if you're Egypt, that's like a miracle. I feel like I've never seen an Egypt live to the end of the game ever. They're just like, they're like to turn limit, that just never happens because they're so soft at home. And it's funny because you would think that they'd be as easy to defend as like, any other whatever, Aztecs or anything else. But the thing is you're making war chariots instead of archers most of the time. And like if you don't get a kill with your war chariots, they cannot defend. Our war chariots are terrible at defending because you usually can't hit into enemy stacks because they'll be on mountains, and they have no defensive stats, so they can't really hold down anything at home. So they cannot play a long game, in my opinion. Whereas Hittites, if you just take your golden age, a little bit later than Egypt, so you take it. I think Hittites, you almost need a granary to make them work because you really want to be size 7 when you take Golden Age. And it's really hard to get a good number of cities out and be size 7 when you take Golden Age. But if you can do that, when your second cities are on that 7 and 8 shield threshold, they at least are 2-turning like a useful unit the whole time. Whereas if you're 2-turning a war chariot, not like a 3-man with 7 shields or whatever, it's just like horror. It's terrible. So that's kind of like, I think I'd rather actually, if I were playing Egypt most of the time, do per turn warrior than I would do 2-turn war chariot. So
interesting. I see. The point about being able to defend and survive as Egypt. I mean, it depends, right? It really just depends on the game what you want. Sometimes it's totally fine to be spamming war chariots the entire game and then eventually die and you did your job. And other times you're doing that, but it's actually bad because you can't get a kill, you can't pressure somebody that hard. Maybe your initial stack failed or something. Maybe there's just no enemy to attack anymore. So people, I agree. I don't think that it's impossible to live to the end with Egypt, but people typically don't do it, right? They would need to switch to archers at some point. They would need to, but it depends on the game as well, right? It's as I said, sometimes you got to recognize which is ideal on people on Egypt. As you say, they're just spamming war chariots usually, and they are a good unit, so I see why that is, but overall, that makes you super vulnerable. So I agree, and I don't really want to defend Egypt here a lot. I think they have been overly prioritized so far. All these second round picks of them, many of them I don't think were justified. But as soon as the ag civs are gone, people start thinking about which is my favorite civ that is not ag. And for many people in MPT, I guess Egypt just feels like the coolest, the strongest, whatever civ to play. And that's why they go for them. I don't know. It is. I don't want to. I still think it's a decent. As I say here, it's a decent MPT civ and a decent civ for this tournament too. Albeit not as good, but yeah, it just hasn't worked. So I think the priority should definitely be lowered.
I definitely think Japan is better than Egypt. Like I think that I do not think they are a comparable match.
The thing is, I mean, so maybe that's a good way to transition this because I wanted to close this segment out by talking a bit about what could be changed here and where this power rankings list differs from both the actual win rates and as well as the priorities that the pick rates that people have put into these. And that's a good starting point here because you're saying Japan may be better than Egypt. But the only thing that differentiates these two civs is that people don't give a shit about Japan. They've never been banned, so they could have been picked every game, and they've only been picked 3 times. Won 1, lost 2 of them. Whereas Egypt is picked or banned almost every game. Just 1 game they went through the draft. They've been banned once and picked 5 times, and that indicates to me, picked 5 times with only one ban, that indicates to me that they're over prioritized, because people aren't that scared of them, but they are still picking them every time. And they've got that one win last night and 4 losses before that. So they're pretty much the same in terms of stats. The only difference being that people recognize that they don't want Japan, and they don't recognize that they shouldn't want Egypt. So I don't know, the stats don't reflect it so far, but if somebody can demonstrate to me a couple of good Japan tourney games and pull them off successfully, I'm not opposed to moving them up. It just doesn't seem like neither the players nor the stats seem to love them really so far. But fair enough. I take your point, and for some people they were even concerned Japan might be OP during the testing, but no, it's so far nobody seems to be of that opinion. So maybe we'll get a couple more picks in that regard. And the last thing I wanted to talk about with these stats here is the aggressives, of course, because the tier list there is pretty clear. It's like Celts. Everybody has the typical MPT Celt boner going on.
Yeah.
And then Incans are the only Russia aggressive, so they're super high tier. And then there's Maya and Iroquois pretty much being picked interchangeably in that stage. And if you take a look at the stats here, dude, it's a pretty clear picture. Celts with those 5 picks, 5 losses, haven't gotten a single kill. We've got the Incans also picked 5 times, but they've got 4 wins. 1 loss and 4 kills. They are the Civ with the most kills as well. So they're super efficient in that regard. And then you have the other 2 aggressives, and they're both also pretty comparable. They've got 5 picks for the Mayans, 3 wins, 2 losses, no kills. And the Iroquois with 3 picks, but of course they've been banned more often than the Mayans have. And 3 picks, 2 wins, 1 loss, 1 kill. So I would say why is there, or you can come down on either side of this. Why is there no argument to be made for Mayans or Iroquois to be in the same tier as the Celts? Or if you think that there's an argument, please make it. But that's what I'm wondering about. Why are the Celts up there, never killing, never winning, and the Mayans and Iroquois, why aren't they being moved to the first round?
Well, okay, so I think it's interesting. I'm actually surprised. I thought Mayans were doing even better than that. Like, they're doing well, but I honestly thought Mayans were doing like way better than that. I guess some games haven't been their fault. Like last night Cheeze was on Mayans, but Anti died super early, so it didn't. Anyway, I think Celts have been. I don't know if they're being played like it's normal MPT, and that's the problem or something. But Celts really excel when you get like 5 cities and you start pumping Galax and whatnot, because they take so long to make their units. And if you want to do upgrades, which I think is more the way to go, these games are only, is it 72 turns? Is that the turn limit?
72.
And most of the time they're decided well before that, as far as, like one team clearly in the lead and the other one trying to struggle to kind of stay on, but not, and so, Celts, if they hit their stride in normal MPT around turn 50 or 40 or whatever, then, in this format, that is, where that would be half over in the, normal MPT. That's like 2/3 over, and there've probably been 2 or 3 kills already, So their impact feels like it's much harder to make work, and they draw a lot of attention. I mean, when you are playing against the Celts, usually you have a rusher civ because you've picked to not just get steamrolled by the Celts, and they almost always end up going right at the Celts, because they, you don't want to end up getting just, plowed by a loose cannon Celt. And so I think they have a harder time because Celts in general have a harder time because they are forced to play defensive when they don't usually like doing that. It's unintuitive, but I think upgrading like 4 Galax as fast as possible might be a better strategy than the normal MPT. Wait till you can get like 10 or 15, you know? And so I think that's why they're not doing so well. And then as for Iroquois and Mines, I feel like Mines are playing really strong, but they've had strong players play Mines as well. I think like generally the skill level of the Mayan players been pretty high, and so because they can be done so poorly, and they're vulnerable is the problem. You know, not so much early on, but with the first sword stack that arrives at their door, they are vulnerable because it's so hard to make a defensive effort against swords as Mayans, and you know, without archers and things like that. And so I think it's still hard to put them above Celts because they feel like they're playing like Celts just with less options, but they are been left alone more maybe, so they've been allowed to grow and things like that. I think I don't know if this is true, but there have been games, right, where neither like Aztecs, Incan, and Zulu haven't been taken, right?
A game without any Russia, basically, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there have been games like that.
So, and I'm sure in those games Mayans were in there because if there weren't rushers, that means they were probably banned, and I bet Mayans weren't. So like
I see one game without any Russians, and that's the only one, and there was Mayans in there, but they lost.
they did lose. Okay, so well, and see, and that kind of makes sense because Mayans work so well against rushing civs, you know,
Okay.
because they can just warrior spam. They don't need to. You know, the best counter to Aztecs, I think, is just to have like 4 veteran warriors or whatever. It's like, you know, that's
Yeah.
better than having Bombard because you know Bombard is great for taking out swords. So
Yeah.
they just
Yeah.
have a better offensive stat. But I think because of that, mines are less useful than Celts because Celts could do that too. You know, they could play pretty much the same game mines play, but if Celts were picked where mines were there, then I'm sure they would have gone for a rusher civ or something. I don't know. It just feels
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
and then
honestly. Mhm.
Iroquois are weird because it's like on the last map, Iroquois would have been great. The one anti versus
Oh yeah.
Halo map.
Yeah.
Because with the big distances, lots of mountains to get your like in enemy land to get your horse stack on, they would have been amazing there. But some of the closer quarters maps, getting a faster sword stack is is actually better, it feels like, than horses, and so it's harder to justify because it's hard to, you know, the Iroquois are weird, but you need to GA to get your numbers up. But you once you've GA'd, you can't stack chariots to upgrade, so they're a clunky civ to play sometimes for that reason.
I see that. And you've brought up a couple of very interesting things there. I think so. Definitely, first of all, I think these stats are very much exaggerated, and it's an outlier.
Yeah,
The Celts aren't actually horrible.
no,
However, you're saying something very interesting here. They have a lot of gravity in the game, and they make people
hmm
go for them. And I think that is people are playing properly against the Celts, and maybe they aren't respecting, especially the Iroquois enough. You should
yeah,
probably because you should do the exact same thing against the Iroquois.
yeah,
But then I also I think the resources are very interesting because out of these aggressives, the Celts are the only ones that really need iron, and
right,
iron is just naturally harder to get than horses, especially when the enemy is sitting on it.
yep,
Because when the enemy is sitting on horses, that probably means he's sitting on plains or grassland. It could be hills, but most of the
hmm
time plains and grass. And for iron, it's always mountains or hills. And once the enemy
right,
gets 1 or 2 units on there, sometimes you just never get it back. And that
yeah,
is of course the worst case scenario there for the Celts. And that's
yeah,
not typically as bad with civs that can go for horses. And then also what you said is the players playing the civs. And that's an interesting angle because I agree, Mayans is definitely a civ that typically the sophisticated class likes to equip themselves with. But I've looked at it here, and that is super weird. I'm just going to read to you every player who picked Celts and then every player who picked Mayans. And then you tell me which the better lineup is. So we got the Celts players, Obi, Cheeze, Rico, Archreaver, Halu, and that's it. These five.
I bet you I could do the Mayans one. I bet you I know what they all are.
Yeah, go for it, please.
So Reed Bob, he's done it twice, I think, right?
Yes, double Red Bob.
Abby once.
Yes.
Cheeze once.
Yes.
And there's one more, is that right?
Yes.
Actually, I don't know if I can pick out the last one.
It's Cheeze. It's Cheeze again.
It's Cheeze again.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So we've got
Cheeze
two Cheeze, two Red Bobs, and one Abby. And the Celts have been played by, as I said, Obi, Cheeze, Rico, Archreaver, and Halu. So to me, the Celts lineup are the better players.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But there's context to be applied, of course, because in that Halu Celts game, he didn't get to play. That was the one, if you remember, right, against Elk, where Elk just completely manhandled him with Roam. And he never got that iron. And that was the extreme case, right? He spawned in the one spot of the map where you couldn't get iron if the enemy made it a point, and they did. So that's a bit of an outlier there. And then we've got comparable examples. Maybe Obi in the first game, he just had a way worse team than the enemy. He was playing with Red Bob and Boogie against Anti, Kismic, and Elk. That's just a super tough matchup as well. And I see why he could lose that, and it was also not a favorable map. Now, the only issue is that's all nice and well, right? We're giving tons of disclaimers there, why it's actually okay that Celts are losing these games. But we're always making excuses. But if you're making an excuse, if you're criticizing something, you gotta say what you want. You gotta say what you'd rather have. So the question is, what even? And I know, like that you've just explained it. Typical MPT, 5 cities, turn 50 build. That's not happening here, right? You don't have a free builder spot in this tourney unless somebody antis out, and then you can just free build like Reaver yesterday. But no, typically you gotta actually play the game early. And what kind of map is good for the Celts? Because I was thinking in my head, maybe a map with a bit of space would be good, and then you'd ideally one of these. The one that came to mind for me was the one, if you remember, the one where Anti played Scandinavia. That was actually the first game
against Obi, and
against
he killed
Obi. Exactly, but and that is exactly what came to mind when you described how you wanted Celts to play in this tourney. Because what he did is he upgraded a few berserks, went in. If you Celts, you can actually do that earlier because you don't need to build up the ships as well. So he went in, he got his GA, and then he built up a huge stack of berserks and upgraded again. And that is how I want Celts to be played. But then if I think about it, that was one of these ring maps, right? Where you had alternating teams around the ring. So if you have 2 enemy neighbors and you're not actually Vikings, but you're Celts.
You're Celts. You won't have the space for that.
You don't have the iron. Oh, maybe you have the iron, but you have like 3 cities max. So that's the thing. That's the thing. Like, what type of map can you even play the Celts on and be effective there if the enemy is always gonna hyper focus you like that?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think Archiever had pressure in that one. Kismic sent him units and whatnot, but I think his map was well defendable, and he played it pretty properly. I think if he upgraded earlier, it would have been almost a perfect Celts game, like as good as you could have wanted for the tournament Celts. Not obviously like an FPT Celts, but he got down like 3 cities or something, and he had his iron hooked, and I felt like that was the right situation. We could not have really asked for a better spot for him. I mean, I guess we could have had him on the FPW, and that would have been better because he could have gotten his cities quicker.
I
But
guess.
apart from that, you can't be asking for FPW in MPT. So
No. No, that's true.
um,
But I agree. I agree. He played it fine. He had pretty decent land. He got that Gallic stack. It was a pretty decent Gallic stack too, but
yeah,
yeah. Again, GA is I think what saved Rico there. And you're right. Maybe
yeah,
you could have done it a bit earlier. I didn't hate that map for the Celts,
yeah,
but it was a bit telegraphed, I guess, in that sense. The
yeah,
enemy knew what he could have gotten better vision. I think they didn't have that great,
yeah,
but it's difficult, right? So maybe the actual play for the Celts is to just accept the fact that you're not gonna get to play the game as
yeah,
a high tier carry civ, because
yeah,
if you pick Celts and you are in a ring map like that, and two enemies are actually sending stuff to you, that means that both your other teammates are in a better shape than they would usually are. Unless the
hmm,
enemy is like Zulu and to a lesser extent like Sumeria maybe.
yeah,
Maybe they can
yeah,
pressure multiple civs at once. But typically
hmm,
if two people have to commit to denying your iron or to keeping you small, that means your other two civs are pretty much in great shape. So what I think the ideal setup for Celts is in terms of draft, you got Celts, then you got India, and then you got another Civ who likes to upgrade big. And
yeah,
that can be Persia, Scandinavia, maybe not so much Iroquois because you can't upgrade a lot of mounted with gold. But
yeah,
if you have India in there and then another upgrader, maybe Maya even, you can, if you get that would be awesome. Of course, a bit maybe asking a bit too much there with Celt, Maya, and India.
yeah. That'd be. I don't know who would let that draft happen.
Yeah, and
What
you
team
don't
would?
want to. You probably have to leave up Zulu or something to get that, and
Yeah,
maybe,
exactly. Yeah,
maybe against Zulu that's not that good an idea. But you get my point, right? That's maybe what you can do, because in that case you don't rely on the Celts getting a big upgrade out. You can just have
yeah,
that secondary carry civ, and you've got India who probably are free to get a couple of cities out and stack like ridiculous amounts of gold.
yeah. That's true. I
Maybe
mean, who
that's it.
knows? It could be the best way to play Celts is just keep your cap size 2. Build settlers every time you hit size 3 or whatever. And just build warriors the whole time and upgrade every so often. Maybe that's just don't worry about trying to get Gallic per 2 or Gallic per turn or anything like that. Just upgrade when you need them and the rest of the time just be building warriors and that's it.
Maybe you gotta just get away from that Doomstack
Yeah, I
ideal
don't
that
know.
you've got in mind. But I like that. We'll see if somebody actually comes up with a more fruitful Celt game plan. In the meantime, we gotta wait. Maybe we are
Yeah.
gonna see something tonight. We've got two games as I've teased before tonight, and they're actually starting pretty soon from the time of this recording, so I'll try and get this video uploaded as quickly as possible. We've gone for an hour here, so we're gonna call it at this point. Thank you for being so patient and available. Of course, we're gonna see you and your team play later tonight, and I'll be watching carefully to see and what type of stuff you're implementing here, and if you're following my tier list properly. We'll see. Hopefully, Obi is watching as well. Anyways, yeah, thanks for joining. I'll see you in the game later today, and I'll give you the last word if there's anything left you want to
I
add.
think we're all good. Looking forward to tonight.
Yep, all right, good then. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and look forward to the next episode. Maybe next week. We'll see about that. Catch you then.
Sounds good. See you.